Ethiopia has issued arrest warrants for 76 senior military officers on treason charges for their links to the leaders of the Tigray region. Federal troops launched a military offensive against regional forces in Tigray 2 weeks ago. Leaders of Ethiopia's rebellious Tigray region have refused to surrender to federal troops and instead have claimed that they were winning a war that has exacerbated ethnic fractures. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government has continued to ignore calls for regional and international dialogue to end the turmoil. Ethiopia's growing conflict has since resulted in more than 25,300 refugees fleeing the Tigray region into neighboring Sudan. The UN Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, is warning that a full-scale humanitarian crisis is unfolding as thousands of refugees have been fleeing the ongoing fighting in Ethiopia's Tigray region each day to seek safety in eastern Sudan, an influx unseen over the last 2 decades in this part of the country. Women, men and children have been crossing the border at a rate of 4,000 per day since the 10th of November, rapidly overwhelming the humanitarian response capacity on the ground.
A major humanitarian crisis is unfolding in Ethiopia, the United Nations said on Tuesday, with 4,000 people a day fleeing conflict in the Tigray region into neighboring Sudan. The 2-week-old conflict, in which Ethiopia's Prime Minister accuses regional forces of attacking the national military, has prompted more than 27,000 to cross the border in all. Baba Baluch is a spokesman for the UN's Refugee Agency.
There's no sign of the fighting to stop right now. So the fear is, as the fighting continues, we could see more refugees arriving. The number of 27,000 or more than that is what we have registered. It could reach 30,000 and beyond.
Those fleeing the conflict include Ganit, who recently crossed a border river to arrive in the Sudanese town of Hamdayet.
I don't know, but there was heavy fighting and many people died. After that, they told us to leave, so we fled. Everyone did.
Sudan already hosts nearly 1 million refugees, including those who have fled conflict and poverty in Chad, Eritrea, Central African Republic and South Sudan. The UN's Refugee Agency has also raised concerns for tens of thousands of Eritrean refugees settled in Ethiopia, saying clashes have occurred near to one of their settlements. The UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says a humanitarian corridor is a priority and that negotiations are ongoing with the authorities.
Juliette Stevenson is United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Senior Communications Officer for Ethiopia, and she joins us now via Zoom. Thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the programme. Tell us what we know is happening currently. Is the situation people still crossing the border at these massive numbers?
Yes. So we're seeing an ongoing and unfolding humanitarian crisis. Certainly from the Ethiopia side, we are seeing an increasingly extremely difficult operating environment in the Tigray region. The entire humanitarian response is completely constrained in that area. We've had a communications blackout since the 3rd of November, meaning it has been impossible with internet, with telephone. There has been no movement, no accessibility. Things are running extremely low. We're now to a point where they're running out of fuel. There is no electricity. Banks are closed, no ability to get cash. And with a no-fly zone and the lack of ability to move anywhere by road, there is no potential to move in desperately needed supplies.
How far are these people having to travel and how are they getting there?
We hear from our colleagues in Sudan, people are traveling by foot to cross. It's extremely difficult to get a full picture of what is happening in terms of the conflict in Tigray and how this is affecting civilians there, both for the Ethiopians, but also for the Eritrean refugees that you mentioned earlier, for the 100,000 who are based in that region in 4 different camps. In the last days, it has been very difficult for us to get any information coming from this area to understand if indeed refugees or others have had to move. We are expecting further movements into Sudan. That influx is ongoing. It is at a scale that has not been seen for many years going into the eastern Sudan. Should also mention with the now 2 weeks of conflict that the humanitarian impact, even if the conflict were to stop now, will be massive in that area. It was already a place where over 1 million people were relying on some type of aid, be that those who are internally displaced due to climate, the Ethiopians living there who had food insecurity, or the refugees as well.
I would imagine then, once they cross, Sudan wasn't set up for these kind of numbers. So how are they managing? How are you managing as a relief agency?
I mean, this has really been a scramble at the beginning. As you said, this was not an anticipated crisis, nor was the swiftness and the severity of the crisis as well. So UNHCR, its partners, including UNICEF and WFP, alongside the government of Sudan, are mobilizing everything they can to be at the border, to provide the most basic of services, water, access to healthcare. Don't forget, we're still in the midst of the COVID crisis as well. So all of this must be done mindful of those conditions, to then, after reception, be able to move people away from the border area into some location where they can have a proper shelter. So we're quickly moving all of these things into place. Obviously, it requires a lot more resources, and we will always be playing catch up because refugees continue to arrive across the border.
And in these kinds of situations where there's overcrowding, the vulnerable are often young children and kids, and all of a sudden you've got other crises that can develop, health issues as well, I guess.
No, this is certainly the case. I think problems do not end when you cross the border. We do always have in crises where people are forced to flee from this type of conflict, you do have children who become separated from parents. You have split families. You have those who've experienced trauma from conflict. You have those with health conditions which are exacerbated by having to move in this way. You see pregnant women having to cross the border. So really those health issues are a concern, both at the immediate stages of crossing, but also as time goes on, to ensure that you have places where refugees can live in security with the adequate amount of services put in place to assist them.
We're getting reports that people are arriving with very few belongings, suggesting that they left in a hurry. And so I guess this is nothing short of trauma, and they must be coming with all kinds of fears, and psychological assistance must be something that you're thinking about.
Yes, so this is something which is part and parcel of having to flee for your life, really, in an unexpected way. People were not prepared. If someone is suddenly in the middle of conflict in a place that you live that you did not know was coming, you do not have time to take things with you. And certainly the psychological impact of crossing to a neighboring country and being in exile, it's extremely challenging. So this is always part and parcel of any type of response.
Again, we received reports that there were some killings that took place, and people being beheaded and things like that. How much do you know about what's actually happening? And if that kind of thing continues, I would imagine this is partly what's informed people running away.
I mean, this is one of the issues, the complete communications blackout there. When you have a lack of communication, with that you also have misinformation, you have an increase of fear. So this is certainly feeding into the narrative. Imagine people in that area have not been able to contact loved ones or have any sort of contact with the outside world to understand what's going on. So it's only natural that they would try and seek safety, whether they're moving inside Tigray or if they're choosing to move over into Sudan. We really don't have this full picture of what is happening in different areas. It's akin to snippets or a patchwork of various different reports. But this makes it both very difficult to understand what's going on and very difficult to also plan a response when we do in fact get access to properly assess and provide assistance there.
Based on the current flows of people going across the border, how many people are you anticipating actually ending up having this need for your services?
I mean, we are assisting as an organisation both those who are internally displaced and also refugees. We do plan for various scenarios when you have a conflict such as this for potential outflows. I mean, certainly at the beginning we envisaged that we would have 20,000 people crossing a month to Sudan. That was surpassed within a few days. So they're looking to sort of revise these figures all the time, but we are certainly looking at potentially larger numbers. I think this is why it's imperative that humanitarians are able to provide assistance inside Tigray in the first instance, but that this conflict comes to an end.
Are the Ethiopian authorities assisting in terms of helping you access those that are perhaps stuck on the wrong side of the border?
From within Ethiopia, we're continuing to advocate for assistance, both to be able to move in basic items and food to assist people, but also sort of in the longer term to be able to do proper assessments of people's needs and understand what's happening across the whole region. We do continue to advocate for that on a daily basis, and we hope that it will bear fruit shortly.
All right, so what's the biggest need right now?
For us, the biggest need is access, to be able to have access there. People need fuel, people need cash. We're really at the most basic necessities of life no longer being available. Without fuel, without cash, services cannot continue. I mean, the services that were there are now completely compromised. So we need this type of immediate access to be able to respond to the needs, as well as sort of a larger long-term open access to really meet the needs properly.
And how are you managing to get your aid workers there? That must be another logistical nightmare.
We had aid workers already based in the Tigray region in Shire and also in the capital, Mekelle. Because of the ongoing security situation there, we are now there with only the most critical of staff, but they're not able to do their jobs if they cannot get to the people in need. And certainly to be able to bring in additional staff to do larger scale distributions, for example, without access to flights, without being able to go in or out by road, we are really at a standstill now.
All right, and I know that one of the things that you've done is a plea for funding. How can people assist, and what kind of amounts are necessary just to cope with the immediate needs?
I mean, we're certainly looking at all of the resources needed, but it will be large amounts. We've already started to request for donations through our UNHCR website, but we will be providing further information on this while people are doing their very detailed response plans. But certainly it will be large amounts needed in the first instance for the reception areas in Sudan. And certainly when we have a better understanding of the real scale and the amount of people that we need to assist, we will be informing the international community of those needs very vocally.
All right, Juliette Stevenson, we're going to leave it there, and we wish you strength, and hope you get the assistance that you desperately need to help these poor people that are suffering enormous trauma. And I can only imagine the situation on the ground for them. Thanks so much indeed.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's Juliette Stevenson with the UNHCR Ethiopia office. She's a senior communications officer, telling us about the challenge that the humanitarian help is facing as this crisis unfolds. More than 4,000 people crossing the border into Sudan every single day, so there could be tens of thousands of people and in dire need on the Sudan side of the border.